With how huge both Dungeons & Dragons and podcasts are separately, it's no wonder that there's so many D&D podcasts. But in my eyes, the best of them all has to be Just Roll With It, an absurdly powerful and chaotic podcast starring Slimesicle, Grizzly, Conda Fiction, Triple McWeedy, Bisley, and Narwhal. On their own, these are some great creators, but together in Just Roll With It, they managed to make some incredible moments that range from hilarious to suspenseful to even tear-jerking. But I'm not just going to sit around here talking about how good Just Roll With It is, because I'm going to sit around here talking about how just good with it is, and why it's that good. And before I get into the meat of this video, I would suggest anybody who isn't familiar with JRWI listen to the podcast first. It's legitimately one of the funniest things I've ever listened to, and it also has an incredibly enthralling story that is greatest left unspoiled. There's so many huge events that blew my mind when I first heard them, and if they had been spoiled, they wouldn't have had the same impact. So, if you're interested in D&D or any of the creators, or just want a good podcast to listen to, Just Roll With It is for you. In regards to spoilers, I'm going to be spoiling stuff from Arc 1 through, early to mid Arc 2, Not a ton of Arc 2, though, any of the more major stuff, and I'll mention it. But I will be talking about the Arc 2 finale, Arc 2 Episode 42. Holy crap, I will be talking about that after the end credits screen. So the whole video will finish, the end credits screen will go through, and then I'll be talking about Arc 2 Episode 42, the finale of Arc 2, because, oh my god, I cannot just sit here and not talk about that. That was insane. So if you want to hear about my thoughts about that, make sure you wait through till the end. Now, after all that preamble, let's get into what makes Just Roll With It so incredible. Just Roll With It follows the story of the Fated Five. 5 warriors who are destined to save the world from Ungaro the Dragon Turtle. The 5 are the half-elf brothers Broad and Silnan, Taxi the Tabaxi, Mountain the Dwarf, and the female tiefling grave cleric Velarissa. Yet while Ungaro is a huge threat, the party has to deal with those aiding his return to the world, like the mass murderer the Barber, the resurrecting Blue Orc, Broad's patron/former patron, Obnox Shy, and Broad and Silnan's father Brendan. And that's just the first arc. The second arc includes a party member reclaiming their royal throne, a new member joining and helping save a time-trapped land, religious repenting so hard they have to go to another plane, and trying to save a party member from a curse that could tear everyone apart. Narwhal, who's the DM, does an incredible job at pacing out the story so that he gives everyone a chance to breathe and have fun in different roleplay scenarios and let them take charge. But he always knows how to reel both the players and listeners back in with the plot once it gets important. He's got a huge task on his shoulders as the DM to create an engaging story and world, and oh my god, does he do it. The majority of Arc 1 takes place in the Great King's Wharf, and by the end of it, you get a really good understanding of the differences of by the port compared to the upper class level nearby, and even within the castle walls. Yet with Arc 2, the party is out and abroad, and I love all the different places they go to, with the different events in each area, from circus heists to vampire towns to mysterious dungeon gauntlets to airship battles in dwarven kingdoms and snowy mountains. Each new area has some crazy events that give different characters time to shine. That's another strength in Just Roll With It, is that it never feels like there's one main character. This is because the story of the Fated Five, all of the characters have different arcs and different parts of the arcs where they shine, and it would be really easy to just, only Broad is important, only Velarissa is important. It'd be a lot easier, but Narwhal manages to pull off this incredible balancing act. And also, everybody who's voicing the characters, but he manages to balance the story so that there's always a big story beat that directly intertwines with their, at least one of the characters' origins, and it makes sure to switch it up all the time. And the podcast is at its best when the characters are dealing with the personal arcs as well as the big character dynamic events, within the party. And there's some great role-playing and plot, which luckily happens a lot of the time. When I started listening to the podcast, it was when the series was dealing with the hunters and the time situation in Gaywick, and the tension of waiting for each new episode just killed me. After, being able to binge all the Arc 1 and early Arc 2 stuff, getting there and it was like, oh god, now I have to wait for each episode. Ugh, that was a lot. But I won't talk about what's happening in the most current episodes, but it's just the perfect culmination of earlier plot threads that tie in and become super personal to the characters, and the wait to see what's happening is killing me. But it's just, again, not going into details, but just the way that the elements of, previous plot threads from the earlier arcs and, character and story beats are all being elevated throughout and not being forgotten. They're consistently throughout the podcast, plot threads that I have forgotten, as a listener, get brought back up and reintroduced, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember all this now, and it ties in so well. And right now, it's such a good stage where the stakes have been elevated, and I want to talk about it, but I'm not going to spoil it for anybody. On the topic of characters, though, I want to get into each party member and talk about what makes them so great individually.
Nice forearms and nicer staff. What's your name? Did you just walk up and say that to me?
Yes, my name is Brad.
First, I want to start off with Brad Vengalore, who was played by Slimeskull, and who was the reason I got into Just Roll With It in the first place. Brad and Silnan are both brothers, but the series starts with them reuniting after years of being apart, as well as the whole party joining up together. Brad is definitely the most chaotic in the party, and a lot of the crazier antics are a direct result of his actions. However, just because he's a goofball most of the time doesn't mean he isn't a powerful member of the party. As a warlock, he uses his magic both in battle creatively, as well as with some creative non-violent effects like Shadow Broad. While he's generally the most lighthearted in the party, there's a lot of tragedy to his character just under the top layer. He may crack jokes a lot, but it may be as a defense mechanism for all the tragedy in his life, from his mother dying giving birth to him, or his father abandoning them, and having to grow up on the streets as a thief, and then bonding himself to the patron Obnox Shy, who's a sadistic man who uses Broad and his friends for entertainment and constantly screws with them. There's a lot to Obnox Shy. We also see Broad's character and how much he cares for the party members, as, other than Silnan, they're his first true family that's there for him. Speaking of Silnan, some tragic stuff happens to him, more on that later. And for a bit, it just tears Broad apart. Even once things get back to the normal, the effects of that event still weigh on him, and the weight on his shoulders of not doing something about it. And it's a very realistic portrayal of what would happen, in that scenario. So, as I was just saying, when Silnan is killed by the Blue Orc in Arc 1, the tragedy weighs so heavily on Broad, and it shows the truly serious side of him we don't see as much. That death scene is a lot to handle again, when you're listening to it the first time and when you're re-listening to it as well. Yet I think we've gotten some of the best Broad character work in Arc 2. The Silnan relationship has had strong ups and downs, and with the demon within Silnan finally being unleashed and seeing him destroy Broad's attempts to help out just hurts to hear, especially with Broad's trying to, get the entire party on board to help. Personally, though, I think one of the best plot threads has been that of Broad and Obnox Shy, when the storyteller came through and exposed Obnox Shy, and then took Broad under as a bard and his own student. Oh my god, was that so cool. Then you tie that into what's happening now with, again, not gonna do any spoilers, but Obnox Shy and the storyteller are both becoming more intertwined with the main plot rather than just being on the edges, and it's setting up for some big moments later on, and whew, that's gonna be exciting to see.
Alright, Silnan, you're up next.
How's it going, fellas? My name's Silnan.
Next up is Silnan Vengalore, who is played by Condafiction. Silnan's a rogue, and I would say the character who causes the most controversy within the party, whether it's from his shady past with thievery and assisting in a political ransom that ended with a dead child, or his current problems of dealing with demonic possession that puts him at odds with everyone else. This is what makes him such a fascinating character, though, as on top of that, which he's constantly trying to push past to be better, he's trying to stay protective of Broad while opening up, after always living a life of isolation and crime. Plus, for a while he was living with the Rat King, and that dude is just friggin' weird. During that time, though, he was caring for the deformed goblin Hiltree, more about this fun fellow in a bit, showing how Silnan, despite his reserved rogue exterior, is a very caring person who does whatever he can for those he truly cares about. One of the craziest plot points was when Silnan died, and that shocked me because, it's relatively early into Arc 1, it's in Arc 1 after all, and it's just, the brutal fight with him and Broad against the Blue Orc was crazy, and the fact that Silnan, died so early into the story was unbelievable, and seeing how the team fell apart without him showed how much they had all grown together, and his return with Taxi resurrecting with him was incredible, even with the incredibly sad loss of Ugarth. Then in Arc 2, him having the internal battle between his demons and Catherine trying to save him it's fascinating, and the ending of Arc 1 where everybody saw their visions, him being split into two parts, being pulled to the light and the darkness, it's such a cool image. Silnan having this force within him that can take over at any time and just turn him against the party is wild, especially with how he had to use the power to save the airship and fully release the demon. Like, he had been pushing it off for so long, but he realized, the party needed him, everybody needed him, so he sacrificed, a part of himself to do that. And how, despite how much Demon Silnan pisses everyone off, how the party is exploring every way to remove the curse, including, even going to the astral plane, it's such a testament to the great character interactions they all have. If Silnan ever fully turns evil and has to fight the party, specifically Broad, I do not think I will have, the motions available to handle the angst and the drama that would happen with it. I think that might just kill me on the spot.
The name's Saxy, put it there.
Your name's... What the fuck did you... Saxy?
Taxi, the name's Taxi.
Taxi, there was no T.
The next party member is the druid monk Taxi, played by Grizzly. He's one of the more grounded members of the party, but that does kind of come with the territory of being a monk. Taxi comes to the Great King's Wharf to try and patch things up with his girlfriend Oriana, but the party then finds her after she's been attacked by the barber, yet they do manage to save her. This is where we see part of Taxi's character. Now he's constantly trying to save and help others, and will blame himself and tear himself apart to do it. We know that before he became a monk, Taxi had a relatively troubled and difficult past, even so far as being kicked out of his clan for practicing druidic arts. That's one of Taxi's most interesting dynamics, his inner battle between trying to stay balanced and collected, but a different desire to just let loose with his power. And on the few occasions that he does, it's tremendous and terrifying, and sometimes comes back to bite him later on. One of the times it doesn't bite him back, though, is when he just fully releases his power, and, when he brings back Silnan, it's just such a strong moment, and you can see in that moment, his powers are being elevated somewhat, but he has that much within him, and he constantly has to control that and make sure, he doesn't let it loose, and hence why, basically every night he prays and meditates, and it's, a fascinating dynamic, because he's the one who tries to keep the party grounded, not, do the insane stuff all the time, yet he has these crazy urges inside of him and this crazy power that he could release, but he doesn't. An outlet Taxi has to try and control this is exercise and training, but as the series goes on, these actions take a lot more significant meaning than just working out. As he heads into Arc 2, Taxi is feeling weaker than the rest of the party and thinks he isn't pulling his weight, and he ends up training more and more because of it, as he wants to be able to help the party out and not fall behind them. And by the way, this was a really clever way, because, for a while, Grizzly just was not getting good dice rolls, and the way that he managed to work that into the story instead of, either just, ignoring it. Like, even if you ignored it, it wouldn't have been a problem, but the way he turns it into an incredible character arc, it's genius. This is when Mountain notices, and he goes out of his way to get Taxi new staff to make him more powerful. But with Mountain, who I'll talk about next, he isn't the most open and emotional guy, so it's a big thing. And then he and Taxi train together in a way that lets them speak their mind with each other and come closer together as friends. Taxi brings such a grounded element to the party that simultaneously makes their feats more legendary, while also more relatable. It's not uncommon to be self-conscious, but when you're a party destined to save the world and you feel like you're not doing enough, that's a lot of pressure one would put on himself. Yet what Taxi doesn't see is that the party needs him to help guide them and be their morality, and many times their heart. He tends to be the only one trying to avoid fights, at least somewhat, but when he needs to, he always goes to bat for any of the party members. Seeing his growth both emotionally and physically really is a great story that's continuing to expand as the series goes on.
Hey, you're that guy from the tavern, aren't you?
Hey, what is your name?
I go by Mountain.
It's nice to meet you.
Wish I could say the same.
Now we're going to talk about Mountain more in depth, and he's played by Bisley, and the fighter dwarf has a lot to his character, but it takes a lot to find that out. Mountain is the party's muscle and is actually 140 years old, but his journey to meet the rest of the Fated has been a rough one. He's the son of a dwarven king, but the kingdom of Braywick is a matriarchy, and Mountain's mother was not actually the queen, and he was cast out of the kingdom. Luckily, he was found and raised by giants, and when he was bullied for his stature, he decided to become strong so he wouldn't just, have to take it. Eventually, he settled down with a wife, and the two ran a tavern, but it was burned down and she was killed while she was pregnant, and he was injured and had to go on his own. Add on to that the personality of some of the Fated, and explains why Mountain didn't open up for a while. Heck, the first thing Broad and Silnan did was rob him. But while Mountain doesn't express his emotions too much with words, except somewhat recently, he is incredibly telling in his actions. It's pretty clear that he has grown to love all of the party, and constantly fights with and for them, no matter the circumstances. And while he may not be the best with emotion, it's very clear he tries. I talked about how he helped Taxi open up and be vulnerable earlier by reciprocating it, but he also helped Broad bake a cake for Silnan despite their arguments, and even when he throws the cake at Silnan, it's because he isn't appreciating the work Broad put into it to help him. Now that he's reuniting with his father as well, it's fascinating seeing him react to this new challenge. It's not just one he can fight. He's undoubtedly one of the strongest party members and can easily handle the physical threats, but having to deal with his past and ties to the throne is such an interesting arc for this character. Even dealing with all of that, Mountain still managed to be one of the most consistently comedic and entertaining characters, due in no small part to his heavy drinking and blunt way of handling things, a lot of times just stabbing them. In battle is where Mountain really shines as well through his, his anger and his wanting to stab people and his drunkenness, and he can generally have a lot of battle plans that he helps other people follow through, or using his commander strike, which allows other people to attack. He does a great job basically raising the battles to the next level and kind of raising the cooperation of the team as well, because not everybody has things they can do in accordance or for the other party members, but he does, and he can attack multiple times as well, leading to some very dramatic attacks and fights with him at the center of them.
So it works out. Did you excuse me? I don't think I caught your name.
Oh, the name's Velarissa, and you?
We are at the last, but certainly not the least of the Fated, the Tiefling Grave Cleric Velarissa, played by Triple McWeedy. She's generally the only one in the party who actually thinks things out before acting on them, and is essentially the brains of the operations. She also tends to be more emotionally resonant to the people the party runs into, due to her devout faith and the general territory of being a grave cleric, but it's also not much competition from rage, thievery, and social anxiety with the rest of the party members. Vel, similar to the other party members though, doesn't have the best relationship with her family, as her parents disowned her for being a tiefling. Yet later on in the series we get to meet her Uncle Onder, the man who raised her and showed her the teachings of Weejoss, and is just an overall great guy. He helped raise Vel to be caring and considerate, and this is when she goes out to the Great King's Wharf to help pass troubled souls to the afterlife, and she eventually even helps bring Silnan back after his death. Yet, in Arc 2, Vel is actually killed by one of the Beholders, and this is where Broad made the deal with the storyteller and brought her back, unbeknownst to her. This has already started coming back into play as an interesting plot point with the elevation of Amnak Shai on the horizon. It seems like this fate may have harsher consequences than you previously imagined. But Vel's story currently hit a very low point, as she accidentally killed a child who was being used as a vessel in the Baron, which hurts her relationship with the party and severs her tie to Weejoss. She is told by Weejoss to meet a priestess to repent, but instead meets a man named Dakar, who says he's a former lover of Weejoss and that Vel must cross the dimensional planes to destroy a dangerous artifact that's harvesting souls in order to repent. She accepts, but is stopped and captured away from the party because of someone, who I'm not spoiling, but because Vel's infernal blood could possibly be used to stop Ungaro. Vel has always been an anchor for the team, and with the rocky events she's been put through, it's throwing her into turmoil, yet it's helping strengthen the party's resolve and relationship overall. There's everything that's happening with her and Weejoss, who was not as present in Arc 1, but Weejoss is definitely making much more of an impression in Arc 2, and it's super interesting how Narwhal basically interprets her and the different sides of her, and then how Velarissa reacts to that. And so, Weejoss is such a cool character as well. I'm excited to see see her appear more. Now, the Fated Five may be the ones at the core of this story, but the side characters are all so unique and great and do an incredible job fleshing out the world. But there are way too many for me to cover in this video, so that'll probably be in a video I make later on. Before I talk about Narwhal's incredible DMing as the side characters though, I can't forget about Red, played by Red Riot Ross, the half-elf warlock found lost in the maze, and he joins the party. He's great, and no, I'm not biased because he's another red-haired boy, but how he helps shake up the party's dynamic with his general chaotic energy and penchant for violence, which, does help endear him to the mountain.
Well, everyone, from what I can gather from these inscriptions, is that God created racism. And...
Why would he do that?
But, nothing too informative here, though. Seems like a wash.
God
Have you had the water?
Racism.
I can't believe he'd do that.
Yep.
Broad, we suffered so much at the hands of this god.
Because of God.
Eventually, the party escapes the maze, and Red departs and stays back in a city to train and gain more control, as he has severed his warlock ties, which seems to be a running theme with warlocks in this series. But now he's training to fight and, get actual skills outside of that magic. And while he isn't currently with the group, I can't wait until he comes back. And, I feel like it's going to be such a cool moment once, a trained-up Red gets to reunite with the party. I think that it'll just be awesome. He's just a fun new dynamic to add into the party, especially, in Arc 2, and when he was brought in, it really helped spice things up, and just, it's like, oh, he's chaotic, but then he's even more chaotic than we've seen most of the rest of the party be, so, God, he's just such a fun character that shakes everything up. Here we are now at the NPCs, and they are all great. First off, we've got Hiltree, the goblin with a magic tumor on his head who enjoys the simple things in life. He's a party member that is kind of a coward, but I love him for how he is brutally honest about his disdain for most people and things, but can also, surprisingly, have tender moments. When Silnan died, Hiltree was heartbroken, as Silnan saved Hiltree, and the two were partners in crime. And he and Broad ended up having some tender emotional moments together.
I hug him.
Oh, that's a little too tight, right?
Sorry. Sorry if I got some blood on you.
Yeah, it's alright.
Alright.
Hiltree, how are you holding up?
I miss Silnan.
Oh my God.
This is killing me, bro.
I do too. Hiltree, we're gonna get him back, okay?
Oh, wait.
We are.
Yes, I promise.
Alright. How we do that?
Well,
In what way?
for now, just stick with us, okay?
I have nowhere else to go. That was my only friend.
Hiltree,
That's not true.
we're your friends, Hiltree.
And also, Hiltree's tumor is magical and can have powers, and I think that's just a great little addition to it. And also, he's over on Twitter, so you might want to go give him a follow. Let's get Hiltree to 600 followers soon. There's also some villains in the series, like Brendan, Brodden Silnan's father, who was corrupted and turned evil and is the main evil guy in Arc 1, King Rigmond, the king of the Great King's Wharf, who recruited the Fated to take down Brendan, and then turned on them when they helped JRWI escape. There's also Obnox Shai, Brod's former patron, who is sadistic and loves playing with people's lives, who is showing himself as a larger and unhinged threat on the horizon. And the last of the big villains, other than the newest and, super huge one that has come and gone, but, no spoilers there, is the Blue Orc, the one who killed Silnan. He's able to heal and come back from death with certain magic, and every time he appears, there's going to be some great fighting and an emotional story. And I think the villains are a great part of this podcast with how there's a good amount of them, but they all kind of occupy separate spaces but can work together. And obviously, there's the big villain of Ungaro in the background, but he hasn't really, appeared to his full extent yet. He's on the horizon, though. But I think by not, and there are smaller villains and, people the party fights with and stuff, but, for main villains, it's a good array that hits, different points, and, generally they all have some interconnection with, at least one or two of the party members, generally all of them. But it's such, these are some good villains, and they're all, they're not just the same, oh, I'm a villain and I'm going to kill the party. They all have different reasons, they all have different, very different stylings and ways of speaking. Like, you can't compare Brendan and King Rigmond. They're so different, and it's just, that what helps make it really fun. But on a lighter note than the people trying to murder our protagonists, we have their pets. Mountain has a one-eyed dog named Jack, who was too nice to be an attack dog, and has been seen to love and be devoted to Mountain when Taxi Animal speaks with him. Then we have Brod's much less cooperative pet, who is actually a familiar, Live Clock. He's a beholder that constantly mocks whoever is talking, and is essentially also a living bag of holding, nicknamed a gag of holding. And he can also help by shooting eye lasers in a fight. There are just so many insanely good and detailed side characters. Like JRWI is a really big character. He's this kind of French or French equivalent thief, kind of mastermind planner behind all this stuff. And he goes through an interesting arc because at first the party's kind of working with him reluctantly because he knows Silnan from kind of thievery stuff, but then of course Silnan is on a different path now, and then JRWI gets captured by King Rigmond, but then he and Taxi kind of have a heart-to-heart, and it's one, it's kind of more early in the series, but it's a very good emotional beat, and it helps really change JRWI into the new persona of Axel Brogard, or Brogard, whatever the true one is, and he kind of assists the party more now from a loftier and less illegal side of things. Then there's Onder, who I mentioned before, who's Velarissa's uncle, and just great guy, and the keeper of death himself, and just his ties to Weejoss and his protection of Velarissa is great, and he kind of, he can play that kind of, friendly uncle banter to the party, and, he's obviously very caring and respectful of Velarissa, but then when, Velarissa is hurt, or when people are, messing with her, not as much the party, but the people attacking them, he goes all out. He can go ballistic at those times, showing the true strength he has that he doesn't always show off, but you can kind of always guess he's got because of his gigantic stature and armor. I don't want to drag this section on too long, so I just want to mention a few more side characters, because I'll talk extensively about the others in a later video. But one is Ugarth, Silnan's brother-in-arms, who works with the party to bring him back at the cost of his own life. And it's, God, that final moment with Ugarth and Silnan when Ugarth is killed is tear-jerking. I think I almost cried at that one. There's also Catherine, Silnan's late girlfriend turned goddess, who is helping repel the demon inside of him. And a more recent one is Quinn, an eccentric teleporting skeleton shopkeeper who is erratic, and he's so fun, and he's instantly become a favorite recently, but he just keeps popping up when needed, and he just brings so much life, and there's been like 3 or 4 shopping sequences in this show recently even, and I love all of them just because there's so many different things, and it's wild. There are also a ton of other characters like, Oriana, Taxi's girlfriend, ex-girlfriend, essentially. It's complicated, there's so many different ones that I've missed. But again, I'll make a video on them later, just because I really want to give all those side characters their time of day. And there's so many between, in the hundreds of hours of content there is for JRWI, there's a lot of side characters. While the characters and story are a huge part of the podcast, another large chunk of that is expertly done in the combat. There will sometimes be a large chunk of episodes without any combat, more just role-playing, but then other times there's a single combat that can take multiple episodes, and they are intense. Each member of the party has different skills and abilities, leading each of them to take on different strategies in battle. The thrill comes from who the enemies they're facing are, whether it's just a squad of goons or a very personal villain to the party. Add into that the varied terrain, NPCs on both sides, previous conditions of the party going in, and the meanings for each fight and everything. It always just has a different emotional context. Sometimes it's just, it's tense just because the party's weak and they're on the verge of dying. Velarissa's having to heal everyone. People are having to play more strategically. Sometimes it's it's just kind of goofy. It just does, these people are trying to fight us. We can take care of them. We're the fated. Stuff like that. There's always a good difference. Yeah, the crew do a great job in not having their party members just fall into the same, do this attack and then do this attack, cast this spell and then do this spell. Everybody, they could do that. Taxi could just be like, oh, I just cast Flurry of Blows, and that'd be the only thing he ever does. Or Mountain be like, I just cast Commander Strike, Silnan only doing sneak attacks. And they manage to, not only do they mix up the attacks, because sometimes they have to depending on the enemies, but also for flavor and for, to make things more fun in the fights, sometimes they go for bigger risks if their character would do it.
Is to cast a touch spell through Life Clock. And I want to cast Bestow Curse, so Life Clock's gonna fly up and tap him with one of his little eye stalks. And I'm gonna curse him to be afraid of heights.
Okay, Curse is a charming spell, if I remember correctly.
It's a wisdom save throw, yeah. It says curse, not charmed. I don't know.
No. It's
I don't know how much of a difference it makes for this guy, right? But
so that is a 15.
I did it. He's cursed.
He's cursed.
He is now cursed to have a fear of heights.
Yes.
He goes, ah! And disrupts the dog.
It's a dog. No.
Wait, are you serious?
No, I'm not.
Wait, what he do?
It's not his turn. He can't do
God.
anything yet.
You just fucking scared the shit out of me. All right. And this, I know that counts as my action. Does that also count as Live Clock's action?
I would say so, yes.
Okay.
And they also, when they attack, they make sure not to just go, I sneak attack. Silnan doesn't just go, I sneak attack, and then roll his dice. He goes, he explains it. Con of Fiction explains it and goes and says how Silnan sneaks up on the person and stabs him, that kind of thing. And it adds a lot of flavor. And it helps how, all of them actually kind of explain D&D through the podcast, because they could very easily just throw the viewers right into the midst of it and expect them to already know, but that really, it would alienate a lot of people. And this way, obviously they do it less in the more current episodes, because if you've been listening to the current episodes, you kind of know how to play, but they still keep it updated there and make sure that they say what their attacks are going to do. They will explain the spells or explain the specific attack they're going to do in order to keep everybody on the same page, and it's very helpful so you kind of know what's always going on, and they don't edit that stuff out, or at least they don't edit the majority of it out, so you kind of get a technical side viewing of the game as well as the the main story and how it looks in the presentation and action of what's happening. Dynamics also naturally change depending on who's located where, or even if the party is split up and having to fight different characters. Add on to that the implementation of System Shock, where bad enough damage can hurt certain areas of the victim, and things can get crazy. I think my favorite and best example of the brilliant fights are through the maze in Arc 2, with multiple different bosses that all function differently, even sometimes helping the party, that all tied into their goal of escaping. You then throw in the party member of Red for some more flair, and later the drama of what happens with Velarissa and the child, and Broad and the storyteller, which continues through even the most recent episodes as a plot point, and you get some spectacular combat. Seeing as Just Roll With It is a podcast, music is needed to help accentuate the mood. But I gotta say, it is incredibly on point here, so shout out to the editors, as it elevates the experience to another level. The music is used sparingly throughout, not too much but not too little, just the perfect amount. And it's always used to help set the scene. Some joking about with a local shopkeep, a nice jovial tune with play. A vision or religious contact scene, there's sure to be some heavenly singing. But when the swords start swinging and the spells start flying, the music kicks into high gear. The songs are pulled from dozens of different games and series, but that isn't something that's very distracting. Rather, it helps make these events feel more intense because of the caliber of songs that they're chosen. I've gotten literal chills because of the song choice paired with the events happening, especially in the finale of Arc 1 overall. I can't forget about the 3 original songs they have, though. Those are the smooth jazz mid-roll that helps provide a chill interlude within the episodes for the Twitter, Patreon, and Twitch plugs, and the Arc 1 and Arc 2 remixes of the openings, where the recap is discussed as you start each new episode. Every time I hear those first 3 notes, I know I'm in for a good time. Now, for as much as I love Just Roll With It, I do have to admit that there was a bit of a learning curve towards the podcast start. Not everyone had the same quality mics, the editing wasn't always as snappy, and it was harder for everyone to be in and out of character and fully know when to joke, in or out of character, when to, have their characters say something in a plot beat or when to just let it go. However, even just a few episodes into Arc 1, the problems are largely fixed. A lot of the early problems can just be seen as early hiccups. After playing as these characters for a while, everyone gets a better hold on them and their personalities and mannerisms, and throughout the story, Narwhal grows from a good DM to an absolutely stellar one, with incredible NPCs, great landscapes, and amazing moods for different settings. Yeah, and those early bumps in the podcast actually help make it a lot more endearing and feel like a local, it's your friends who playing, a game of D&D, and they get better throughout it. And it makes it feel less of a story that's just kind of plopped out there, it's all put out there without heart. This is, the crew has put so much effort and time into this story and into these characters and into this world, and it shows. There's so much love put into this story, and seeing how it's grown, with their ingrainment into the world and knowing what it happens there more, it, helps the podcast grow on you and make it feel better throughout the entire thing. The majority of Just Roll With It's content is the main D&D campaign. They also put out consistent one-shots on their Patreon of different stories in different places, and they're just so much fun. Seeing everyone play different characters to their campaign characters is great, and these one-shots can get wild. Don't worry if you don't have the money for the Patreon, though. They release some of the bigger one-shots, generally the collaborations as well, on just regular podcasts. And if you want a great example of this, the superhero one-shot featuring Call Me Carson is literally one of the funniest things I've ever heard. By the end of it, I was laughing so hard I was crying.
Now, next up is you, Locksmith. I'm excited to see what you have planned for this.
Well, there's two options I could go with here. One idea I had was spawning 3 shadow keys and forming them in a tunnel mining formation so that I can go throughout the sponge, unlocking a little bit of the sponge at a time and saving people. My other idea was putting a putting a key up to the sponge and opening up its mind to pick its brain.
It's a sponge.
Okay, so I'm going to go with the first option.
Save the second one for when it is not a sponge.
I'm going to go with the first option.
Okay.
And I will start boring through the sponge.
All right.
Is that doable?
Yeah.
Okay, so I got a 1.
Okay. I wasn't expecting that. That's interesting. All right. You charge towards the sponge. You charge towards the sponge. You form 3 keys made of shadow. You hear the sponge gasp as it gets ready to admit defeat, and then you jump into the sponge and you just kind of
Wait, what?
So you see what everyone else sees. You see Locksmith create these keys. They start spinning. He gets ready to unlock this entire sponge, and then he just face plants into it and sinks in.
Why did this happen?
Because you rolled a 1.
You failed. You rolled a natural 1, dude.
A 1, literally the only number that would have caused you to fail this.
But I'm using sleight of hand, which is 20.
I know, but a natural 1 is always a failure. Like 20 is always a success.
Mm-hmm. It's the opposite side of the spectrum.
So, you're going in now. Bye-bye.
I thought I had the solution.
Well, you would have.
That is very unfortunate.
Bacon, yeah, it is, actually. Bacon Man, it is on you.
I feel as useless as Bacon Man now.
Bacon Man is... Dang, why you gotta come for the bacon like
because
that?
you threw a bear at a chimera and missed.
That was useful.
Bringing back up the Patreon, though, and no, not just because I'm a member.
Logan Busby. Logan Busby.
And finally, Logan Busby.
It's a great way that the crew brings in fan interaction to the show in a natural way. Patrons of certain levels can make suggestions for the system shock, what happens at injury levels, Broad's Wand of Wonder, what spells end up shooting out of that, or get their name said at the end of each episode, even suggest magic items and get exclusive merch, and at the highest level, even play D&D with everyone, which is basically a dream. The Patreon is just great with how much it offers on each of the different levels and how it helps support the podcast. Like now there are weekly episodes because of it. And if they reach 10K, there'll be a JRWI studio, which I need to see happen. At the end of the day, I just love Just Roll With It. It's an outstanding podcast that weaves an intricate story, has tons of great characters, and is incredibly entertaining. Everybody does such a great job and puts all their effort into the show, and it's easily apparent. The show has helped me through some dark times and is just a bright light of positivity that I think more people should know about. You've got a great story, great character interactions and arcs, intense fight scenes, and killer comedy with literal hundreds of hours of backlog. In quarantine, what else are you going to listen to, man? This is some good stuff, and it's not like a YouTube video or something or a show or a movie where you have to keep it on, visually as well. You can do it while you're driving, while you're, doing your laundry, and that's how I kind of managed to binge through the backlog is by, being able to listen to it all the time. Thank you so much for watching this video. I know it was very long, but I've got so much positive, stuff to tell about Just Roll With It. It's such a good podcast. I love it, man. And, it's the second arc has just ended, so they're on a break right now. They are doing like a live stream mini series, I guess, with Slimeskull, who's the player of Broad. He's going to be DMing, and so it's going to be fun and obviously very chaotic. But I'm excited for that. And so I honestly, now is a great time to catch up. They're going to they said soon they're going to release an Arc 2 recap. So if you want to do that to jump into Arc 3, you could do that. Or, I say the best way to experience it is just listen to all, it's a couple hundred hours, but it's such good entertainment and it's so well made. And I think, everybody should listen to it. It's so good. And clearly, if you have listened this far, either you have listened to it already or you're very interested. So yeah, just go full in. And so yeah, this video has been an odyssey for me to make, though. It's taken me a couple months because every time I would write something and get it done, a big event would change in the script, and I was like, all right, well, I gotta rewrite this part, this character part. And so that was great. And then literally at one point I had the entire video finished and then my editing software broke and deleted the whole thing. So I was just like, all right, I'm gonna push it till after Arc 2 finishes. But yeah, it's gonna, Mondays are gonna be a little bit darker now that I don't have my Just Roll With It to keep me through. But yeah, so thank you for watching, for sticking through with me here. Thank you for everyone on the Just Roll With It crew for making such a great and entertaining podcast. And if you want to hear my thoughts, remember, stick through the end card. And until next time, I'm Logan Busby, and you need to just roll with it. All right, so here we are talking about the Arc 2 finale, and oh my god, friggin' Obnox Shy has like escaped his prison or something, and then dude, just like the biggest stuff with like Silnan and Catherine, with Silnan like regaining his magic or his demonic powers, but they're under his control, and then friggin' Mountain making a pact with Obnox Shy, dude. And in the original version, before I had to cut it because this came out, I had a big part about Mountain and his how it was such like a touching scene with him and wanting to bring back his wife, and then seeing it, culminate here with, but like she's trapped somewhere, kind of like pulled out of the time stream almost. Like I want to know what they do a lot of time stuff in this show, and that time skip, bro. The fact that they've lost 40 days, because the first 2 arcs took about like what, a month or 2 months. So like the fact that we're getting close to the end game, it's exciting, but it's also scary. And it's interesting because if you look at the arcs, they kind of have like Broad had a lot of character stuff in Arc 1 and Arc 2 as well, with the Obnox Shy, and then the Silnan stuff in Arc 1, and then, but like Taxi had a lot of stuff growing this arc, and then Velarissa had a lot this arc as well, but now we're getting like some good Mountain and Silnan arcs here. It's like, it's so great how they can manage to assign different arcs, essentially, not assign, but work like major character groups into it, and it's just, it's so exciting, and I don't know, bro. It's like, are we gonna get a Mountain corruption arc? Because that would be insane. I don't want it to happen because you can see Mountain's doing it to help everyone out, but the fact that Obnox Shy might twist him around, like, it's just, it's so good, and I cannot wait to see how it goes. This wait until Arc 3 is gonna kill me, but you can be sure, with Arc 3, I'm gonna talk about it because this podcast is just so good. I gotta say, congrats to everyone on the team for making a god tier D&D podcast. So yeah. Again, thank you for watching, and goodbye.